It's an interesting time to be a Republican voter in Ocean County and in New Jersey, because to be a Republican voter is to buck the trend in a Democratic state. And yet in the top of our leadership in this nation is a Republican president whose mantra is to drain the swamp. And to drain the swamp implies going with the taking a risk and finding new blood. In Ocean County, what is the swamp? In New Jersey, what is the swamp? And how do you drain it? And where is the dead wood? These are all questions we ponder as we move into election cycle 2017. There's a lot of activity in both parties as every seat in the legislature is at stake. These are things we consider as we speak to 10th District State Senator Jim Holzapfel. What will this mean for him? What will this mean for us? And what is he thinking about as he moves through enactments, pushes for new bills, and continues to be part of bucking the tide? We say hello to Senator Holzapfel, and in case you're not familiar with the 10th District, it largely hugs the shoreline from Bay Head through Seaside Heights and then heads west through Allen Heights, Toms River, Lakehurst, and Manchester. We're here to learn his stance on the issues, what matters to you and what matters to him. Now, before we get to him, a little bit of background. 23 years in the legislature, wrapping up this year. First as an assemblyman, where he spent time as the chair of the Law and Public Safety Committee, the Joint Committee on Ethical Standards, and the Governor's Study Commission on Parole. He was also Deputy Republican Leader and Assistant Majority Whip in the Assembly. Once he moved to the Senate, he took part in the Law Enforcement Study Commission, the New Jersey Supreme Court Commission on Municipal Courts, the National District Attorneys Association, and he's also served in the Association of Trial Lawyers of America. Also, a one-time Ocean County prosecutor.
Yeah. Way back when?
So here we are. You've actually been bucking the trend for years. So voting Republican in Ocean County means going with the mainstream, but when you get to the state level, it's going against the stream. With that, you have managed to get several key pieces of legislation signed by the governor within your past term, and especially within the past several months. Just tell us a little bit about those.
Well, yes, and I know on a national level it's kind of the lines are drawn. I think in New Jersey, in fairness, with both houses of the legislature being controlled by the Democrats and substantially in the Assembly, the way you get legislation through is bipartisan. You work with the other side of the aisle, because at the end of the day, the reason you're out there is not necessarily for your party, but you're out there to try and do something for the people. I mean, we'll be talking about things that we've accomplished, and of course we can go back many, many years, at least in my situation, and different pieces of legislation that we've gotten signed. But at the end of the day, to use a hack phrase, but sincerely, at the end of the day, it's people want to know, okay, you've done that for us now, what are you going to do for us in the future? So I've always attempted to mold both things that we've accomplished, successes that we've had, with talking about what our intentions are for the future, because that's really what's most important to people. Yes, you've done good things in the past, but what can you do for us in the future, and what do you see as far as where the state's going and some of the issues that are particularly unique to the Ocean County area. Talking about most recent legislation in the last several weeks, Governor Christie signed Peggy's Law, which, you know, we have a big population of senior citizens in the 10th District. Peggy's a terrible story. The woman was basically mistreated,
and that was in an institution.
Yes. And it's been a number of years. This has been years in the coming. So now, under this new law, there's an obligation on the part of any healthcare professional, whether it's the doctor, the nurse, someone who's tending to this person, if they witness or see, or even just the results of, in other words, bruising, injuries, black eyes, etc., that they're obligated to report that information to the police. They face a $500 fine if they fail to do it. Obviously, we're hoping that the fact that this stuff will come to light, excuse me, will deter some of the mistreatment that occurs in both the hospital setting, rehab setting, a nursing home setting, etc.
There's also the animal tethering law.
Oh yeah, we've most recently had the governor sign anti-tethering, which for a lot of people may not understand it, but tethering. But at the end of the day, it's for situations where people, and this is very, very big support from the humane societies across the state, where people will leave a dog or an animal chained in 95-degree weather or in 15-degree weather. There's no shelter for the animal. The type of chains, that the chokers, etc., that are used. This enables the authorities to take that dog or animal, and also obviously these people will face criminal prosecution for improper care of their particular domestic pets. I've always believed that the way you treat your animals to a certain degree reflects how you would treat your children or other people. And so it's very important where we have situations like this, that type of stuff is dissuaded and or prosecuted. Along those lines, we had a piece of legislation signed last year, a very important piece of legislation, where a local resident had brought their animal in, this is Betsy's Law, to a local veterinarian, and there was no indication anywhere that the dog was going to be kept overnight after some surgery, that there wasn't 24-hour coverage of this particular veterinarian's office, meaning where the dogs were being kept. And unfortunately, the dog hanged itself by its collar, got hooked on a cage. And it just, a picture, if you happen to be an animal lover, what a tragedy this would be, to drop your animal off, and just because you didn't come back and pick him up, or the vet may have said it would be better for it to stay the night. We want a sign posted, this is not 24-hour coverage. We want a written statement being given to the customer that their dog is not going to be under constant supervision, or their animal, not just a dog, cat, what have you. Very simple response to what turns out oftentimes to be a tragedy. So those are the types of and of course our big bill that became law, which has national recognition, is the puppy mills, was signed 2 years ago, which really cut into a despicable trade that was occurring right here in Ocean County, of course statewide and even nationwide, where you have these mills, many of them in Pennsylvania, Ohio, where they ship in these dogs. People buy the animal, they know nothing about the animal in the pet shop, and now they start to get attached to the animal, and now they find out 2 weeks later the animal has major medical problems, or situations that the only alternatives are either return the dog or cat or whatever it might be, and or expend thousands of dollars to try and correct the situation. What the law does now is it requires that the complete background pedigree of that particular animal is posted on a cage. Who were the breeders? What was as far as the heritage of the dog? The kennel, where it came from, that it had to be checked over by a veterinarian before it was released to the pet shop. All these different requirements, which, I mean, we do that for some, where do you get buying a television, whatever, you get all kinds of information. This is merely telling the consumer that this dog or animal has been checked over, where it came from, does it have any problems, before you attach love to it, and now you're faced with a major expense because the dog has, or the cat or what have you, has some type of problem that's so substantial that your choices are either send it back or spend the money.
Senator, all these bills speak to compassion.
Yeah.
And that's a through line of all of them. And that compassion has worked its way into our view of drug abuse. It's a lot different than it was when you were a prosecutor. The face of drug abuse has changed. And the sad fact is that you still have victims and you still have culprits. And then there's this whole gray area in between, because some users are culprits as well.
Right.
Some are pushing and using at the same time. It's probably impossible to break down in terms of percentages, but are we doing enough for treatment? Are we doing enough to clamp down on the spread of illegal narcotics? And what are your thoughts about improving the way we're handling it in this state?
Well, the first one is easy. The answer is no. There's not enough treatment available. Unfortunately, what we're seeing today with the opiates, and hearing a lot of it, we still, my office still prosecutes in a lot of municipalities. Narcan is out there, which, you know, your initial reaction, I always think of my grandson or whatever, it could be my kid, that the Narcan brings them back. But now you're hearing stories, it's like the 6th, the 7th, the 8th time that this individual has been Narcan to revive them so that they don't die from the opiate overdose. I think there should be a continuum where, when that occurs, that, and I speak from experience, when I was county prosecutor, we had national recognition, matter of fact, international recognition of an anti-drug program we call Project Good, which was Greater Ocean Opposes Drugs. And we were out there. Terry Farley was my first assistant. An outstanding job. Would be in schools. Would be everywhere. But at the end of the day, to me, it's like a stool. You've got so many legs on it that you have to have a deterrence. You have to keep the finger in the dike as far as the people who are dealing the death that's being dealt out there, and then you have to educate and rehab people. If you take any one of those things out, it's not going to be successful. And unfortunately today, with the opiates, and especially with the fentanyl being involved. Now fentanyl, what's happening for people who don't know, is it's being mixed with the heroin. It's 50 times more deadly than just the heroin. And you're seeing that kind of product being put out on the streets. You're seeing the opiates, which could be, you know, where are they getting this stuff? Well, it could be grandma's medicine cabinet. It could be any place, because a lot of opiates are dispensed for medical reasons, pain, etc. You go to the doctor or the dentist, and some doctors and dentists, and I'm not criticizing, you know, I don't pack everybody together, but you would get a prescription for 30 at a clip, and you may only use 10. Where do the other 20 go? And unfortunately, some of them go right out into the street and are used by family members, particularly younger family members who have an addiction to the particular opiate, whatever it might be. So it's got to be all those things. Matter of fact, I have a bill pending to increase the punishment for people who deal fentanyl. Right now, fentanyl is looked upon as a second-degree offense, and as far as I'm concerned, it's as bad as heroin. It should be a first-degree offense, and we've had that legislation pending now for over a year, and hopefully maybe in the lame duck session it'll get to be moved, because the police have to be given what they need, and the courts also, to take the people who are dealing the death off the streets. But at the same time, we have to do things to educate, and it's very difficult. I never forget, we were doing a program in one of the local high schools, and at the time the Olympics were on, and we asked a question. We said, now if I told you that we have a super drug that will make you a gold medal winner in the Olympics, but at that time we were working on a steroid problem, but in 10 years you would possibly develop cancer or whatever particular terrible disease, how many of you, to be, a gold medal winner, would consider taking the drug? And half of the people in the room raised their hands. So now, if that doesn't tell you that, kids think they're indestructible, that doesn't tell you that there's an educational issue out there. I don't know what would. So it really has to be an approach across the board. We have passed some recent legislation, which the governor signed. I mean, this is not, we weren't prime sponsors, but the bill we obviously voted for, limiting the amount of prescription number of pills that you can get on your first time when you go to the physician or dentist's office or what have you. We also have legislation which was passed several years ago, which updated the prescription control. It's a website which monitors druggist dispensing of opiates and other drugs. And this is an important weapon for the bureaucracy, so to speak, to check on why and where large quantities of opiates are being dispensed, because that information has to be put into that particular website.
One of the initiatives that's taken place under the current prosecutor's regime is random checks through schools.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you agree with that. And
well, I used to do it.
You did it too?
Oh yeah, we used to. Any given day, they would bring dogs. We tended to try and do the perimeters because, again, my experience has been that when the police would be sighted at a school area, if there were drugs there, the kids would try and get them and destroy them as quickly as possible. And we found a lot of times, because of the school security, etc., they would hide them in wooded areas in and around, very close to the school, but in that general vicinity. So we would run the dogs around the perimeter and what have you. I used to have cars, unmarked cars, that had magnetic signs on it that said narcotic strike force, and the men would drive into the schools on their way to work and just cruise through the parking lot and then come to work. But that message would go through that school that the narcotics officers are here or what have you. And if nothing else, it certainly would depress the quantities that were out there. But yeah, I think it's important. The schools are they're a substitute for mom and dad. When the kids are turned over to the school system, they're responsible for their safety. And certainly anything along the lines of checking to see what's in the schools at any given time, it's the way to go. We do it in public life. If you're a commercial driver, work for government, work for private enterprise, you have to be drug-free and surprise urine tests, etc. It's the way it is today, unfortunately, but it's the way it is.
And it's just one problem in schools. There are a lot of problems in schools, not the least of which has to do with funding. Mm-hmm. I know that you were one of the people who were instrumental in wrenching back several of the $5 million that was taken out of two of our major districts, Toms River and Brick, in the current round of funding.
Right.
What sort of obstacles and what sort of hurdles did you have to jump to get that, and what do you have facing you to get the rest of it back if you can? Well,
it's difficult because, as mentioned before, the legislature is controlled by Democrats. And they're interested, as any good representative is, I suspect, in what's good for their district. And a new funding formula was placed in the budget. That formula isn't passed by the legislature. It's just the way that the money is going to be divided up. And we have school systems, proud to say, that they have some of the lowest per student cost in the state. And we have the holdover from the old so-called Abbott districts, where many North Jersey cities receive exorbitant amounts of school aid while the suburban areas get cut. The new formula resulted in Brick and Toms River losing approximately $5 million. We were able to, not legislatively, but through working with the governor's office, get approximately $3 million of that back. There's a little over a little under 2 million outstanding that we're still working on. We feel confident that we should be able to get that back. On the basis for that is very simple. When Sandy came through Ocean County, as what we all know, we're ground zero for Sandy. We lost in Toms River, Brick, well, a number of towns, great numbers of ratables. Thousands of homes were taken off the tax rolls. We lost some students because you know, people had nowhere to live, they moved. So the student population went down, which this new formula resulted in like a double whammy because, oh, well, you have less students, so you should get less money. But at the same time, the ratables, etc., are gone, so that the schools are faced with a situation where they just don't have the ability to keep loading more taxes on top of people. There are caps out there on the amount of tax increase, etc. So we're saying to the governor, and he's been very supportive, that Sandy's still there. Ocean County's coming back. I mean, you can see it if you follow the ratables. Every year there's more and more and more coming back online. In some instances, bigger houses, as we all know from our neighbors, bigger houses meaning more taxes, more ratables. But we're still not there yet. And since it's a special circumstance, we've asked, and the schools have been very cooperative, that they send in the information that we require, indicating how still the Sandy catastrophe is affecting the ability for the systems to survive, because there's nothing, there's muscle and bone left, there's no fat. When you look at the numbers and what they're spending on per student, they've cut it, and they've been cutting it over the years, and there really aren't too many moves left for them. I know Toms River, for example, had to go into their surplus because of this $1.9 million or so that they're short. Hopefully we can correct that, but it's an ongoing struggle. It's still north versus south as far as I'm concerned. The numbers are clear. The towns that are receiving substantial amounts of money are in the northern part of the state, and we certainly, as a suburban districts, get less than. I mean, if you go up to Jersey City, it's in a renaissance. You go into these Hoboken, they're treated as an area that has to have millions and millions of dollars of extra aid. Meanwhile, they've entered into situations where they're going to, instead of collect taxes from various new buildings, etc., they've cut all kinds of tax deals so that their ratables are down, meaning they're not bringing in the amount of money they should be bringing in. And it's almost like the guy who kills his family and says, gee, Judge, I'm an orphan now, so please take it easy on me. They're giving out all these tax breaks that keeps their rate, the money they're bringing in, down, so then they go to the state and say, we need more state aid for our schools.
Do you think there's any point to trying to create benchmarks for spending efficiency? Would that help would that help relieve the dichotomy?
Well, they have these so-called efficiency ratings, and Toms River is, in other words, they set a standard of what you should be paying for. We're below that. We're spending less than, so to speak, what the state's saying you should be spending. So, yes, I agree. Look, I'm a great believer in a student is a student is a student, meaning how many kids, Senator Doherty from up in Sussex has had a bill pending I've signed on a long time ago, which says, look, you're a student. This is how much your school's going to get to help you pay the cost of educating that student. Now, if there's particular additional problems, fine. There's going to be some adjustments and additional money, but generally speaking, there should be a set amount that the state is, you know, half of our budget, the state budget, is in education, is money coming back to the various 500 plus school systems in the state, and it's a very important issue because that money is like right off the top. So many things, unfortunately, have to be put on hold. You know, when times are good, you can do a lot of good things. Times are bad, there's priorities, and obviously the schools come first. They're the future. But at the end of a budget process, sometimes you have very good causes or good reasons to want to fund something, but the money's just not there.